We are live. You can begin with the session.
All right. Um, a very good evening to everyone and welcome to the author panel discussion, The World is a Shade of Grey. I, for one, am really looking forward to picking the brains of the two preeminent authors with us today, Kochery Shibu and Sujit Banerjee. A very warm welcome from me. I'm very excited to talk to both of you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Smita.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. Let me first start with a brief introduction of the two authors. Kochery Shibu is the author of the best-selling Men and Dreams in Dhauladhar. He is an alumnus of the prestigious National Defense Academy. He has served in the Indian Navy and commanded two warships. Faith and the Beloved is his second historical crime thriller. And many of the characters in the novel are actually inspired by people he has visited during he has met during his extensive travels. He has traveled far and wide, and he has done a diverse set of things in his career. It's very interesting to read about him. His books are available in all major retailers, including Amazon. Um, Moving on to Sujit Banerjee, another very interesting personality, very diverse experiences. He has his book is called Ruksat. It's a book of 26 unique short stories. It's actually in the second edition now of a print, and it's also been translated to French. Sujit is a postgraduate in psychology, but he also works as a tour operator. More interestingly, he is a certified pranic healer and a tarot card reader. I'll learn more about that during the interview today. Apart from that, his books are available in all major retailers. And did I mention that his book has been translated to French? And that's quite an achievement for an author in India. Welcome, Sujit.
Thank you very much.
And a brief about myself. I'm Smita Bhattacharya. I'm a crime mystery author. I have a couple of books out, but I think the more popular ones are Kiss of Salt and Dead to Them, both available on Amazon. Dead to Them is having its second print run. So that's about me. And last, but of course not the least, The Secret Bookshelf. They are my go-to for all author-related collaborations and promotions. They are an online bookstore who promote Indian authors and also have a virtual book club. And interestingly, they're offering a 20% discount in the Delhi Book Fair. The code is DBF20 and it's valid until the end of September. All right, so welcome to both Sujit and Shibu once again. Let me begin with the topic itself, right? The world is a shade of gray. And the first question to Shibu. I've often wondered this about my own self when I'm writing, and I just want to pick your brain, Shibu, in terms of how an author thinks. Often we are tempted to paint our heroes as white, like he cannot do any wrong, and villains as black, as in he's the worst person of all. But we know that in real life, it's not that way, right? I mean, people are all shades of gray. So I want to know from you, how do you escape that trap? How do you get inspired to write your characters? And how much of those characters are actually, your own self or people who are obviously going to be gray, right? So how do you, determine what kind of flavor they should have? How gray, how black, how white?
Oh, actually, you have kind of a very sharp question, but uh, I guess that is at the heart of everything. Finally, storytelling is all about people. The rest, everything falls to the background because unless your characters come live and unless they come look convincing to the readers, then of course that falls short. So as a practice, what I do is that I do character sketching, and I spend 80% of my time in both the novel goes into character sketching. So even before I may start writing the novel as such, the character sketching is an ongoing process. And each character, irrespective how small or big the role of the character is going to be in the novel, will have a background, a past, a present, and of course future as the book plays along. So the simple ways, the answer of question to the what you asked will be like, when you see a Hindi movie, you'll invariably find the hero as a past. You can correlate as to why he is the way he is with his past. Villain never has a past. So you do not know. You know that he's an evil man, is just dropped from hell or from heaven or wherever he is dropped from. So that part is yes. That means, as a matter of fact, it's one of the things that I take effort to and believe in doing is that all characters in the novel, whether it is protagonist or antagonist or the side characters, all of them will be in shades of grey, and they should look live and they should come live. So that's the first part. Second, of course, that in the first book there was always the challenge of your personal biases or your personal shades of grey may also be coming into it without knowing. That possibly can happen for the first book, and if you've got a right editor, he or she will kind of knock out those biases from the book. But otherwise, yes, I agree. It is an important point. I personally do not believe that you cannot look at life as grey. Sorry, a correction. You cannot look at life as black and white, nor can you look at characters as black and white. I mean, nobody is a born saint. Nobody is a born devil. They always, yes, the degree of goodness and degree of evil may vary. So the shade will always be in shades of grey and should be so.
All right. I'll ask a follow-up question on that in a while, but let me move on to Sujit. Holding on from what Shibu just mentioned in terms of it's not just characters, it's also the world, situations, circumstances that are grey. So Sujit, moving to you, your book is a collection of short stories. They're about, exploring dark recesses of the mind, and they're unique themes. In your own, when you build a world with stories and situations, do you bring the element of grayness into them? As in, what I mean to say is some situations like look good now, but actually you realize later that they are bad, or they were not what they appeared, right? So in terms of situations, in terms of story ideas, can you explain how you build in this grayness in the themes itself? Sujit? Yeah.
Interesting question. Actually, come to think of it, one advantage that I had over Shivu, what he was talking about, is the fact that out of 26 short stories, 20 of them are real life stories. So being a student of psychology, when I did case studies later on, when I started healing, people would come to me with their different problems and same with tarot card. I realized basically those are the characters who appear in my book. Now, I have not painted them in any color. I mean, you can talk about 50 shades of gray, but I have not painted them in any way. So each of my story is just a statement of a character. And I have not that was an advantage. I did not put my opinion in it. And I just left the end in such a way that the reader has to make out to what depth is the character gray. So I had the huge advantage of actually having real life stories. I have just put the stories across the way it was, and let the reader decide how gray they find it.
I have a small follow-up question here, right? So often a story is an author's perspective, correct? So for example, we present it in the way the world is for us. So if suppose there is a situation that has happened, say a war, right? So two countries are fighting, and if you belong to the country which is the aggressor, and you might think your action is right, but the other the country being attacked, or I'm just giving an example, like they might think that okay, we are the victims and they are in the right. What I mean to say is, I'm coming to the question, is that a situation that you depict from your perspective, you're right, and this is like the ideal way, right? When you ask the reader to interpret the what this means, but don't you think your own perspectives color the stories? And what do you do to prevent that? Do you take a step back and see that the story is colored by my perspective? Let me check with a critique, like someone who can critique it and say that no, I think you're thinking in a stereotypical way, you shouldn't. What's your process like for that, to check if your story is balanced, it's balanced and in between? What's your process?
It's very simple. I mean, no story can be told in print or in a podcast or in a Kindle format where the author's bias shows. So by default, if you're writing and you want your book to be a success and to be read by a lot of people, you have to keep that check and balance. You cannot be biased. You talked about two countries at war, for as an example. Let's just take India and Pakistan. I mean, both the countries will have to accept the fact, whether they do or not, but should accept the fact as to what are our drawbacks. Where can we work upon to create a balance? Blaming them, they're blaming us. That's a blame game. That's a coloring the readers or the viewers' view, or brainwash them in whichever way you want to. So I don't think that any author will write a book or a story with his or her own biases, because it's not going to work. So eventually, somewhere down the line, that's why we show the stories that we write chapters to friends and family to say and ask them that what do you think about it? So that check and balance is automatically there. A writer does not write in isolation.
Yeah, so I understand. So you have to, like a good writer should not be biased.
Absolutely.
He or she should try the best to leave it open to interpretation.
Yes.
So the shades of gray is open to interpretation. That's very interesting. Okay. Moving on to Shibu. Shibu, now you've gone all around the country. You've worked in remote, Himalayan villages. You've, helped. I have just also learned you've helped set up a shipping company. So you've done lots of things. Now, what's your experience been like about people? And I wanted to take one example. Please take an example to show the inspiration of a character in your book, in terms of the people you've met and how they have inspired the flavor of your book. In a hero and a villain, or rather, let's take a villain, because I think that's the most colorful person or element of a book. A good villain always makes a very interesting book, right? So can you take a bad person, like so-called bad person of your book, maybe give an inspiration from real life who has inspired that character, and talk about the good part of that villain? Like, we take a bad thing and just talk about the redeeming factors of that villain. Over to you, Shibu.
Okay, so again, you've come back to that, kind of repeat of the first question. So I'll give a couple of global perspectives in the sense, everything that you write in the book, from first word to the last word, is an author in himself. So whatever you're writing there, you're accountable for it. That's one. Second is, there's always a traditional, the literary theory and criticism question which asks you, does the validity of a statement lie in itself, or does it lie in the perspective? You can take a position for both, you'll have answers one way or the other. Now, as regards the inspiration, I have said this. Let's say I'll give an example. Now, the second book that I've written has covered extensively about the LTTE. So there was an incident which happened in the early 80s, wherein there was a reported incident in those days of print media, which said there was a Tamil family which was burned alive in Colombo as part of the civil riots which took place. And they had kept the two children out, and the parents were being burned in the car. So from the burning car, the father comes out, grabs his children, takes them back to the car, and prefers that they die with him. Now, this was that time kind of a media rage. That time it was, one discussed, that kind of thing which stood with me. That kind of story kind of stuck with me for decades. Because, it's like saying that for a father to kill his own children, it's something, and out of love. It is not out of hate. Here in this says they're being killed. He prefers that, they're dying with them is more honorable. He feels it would be better for them than being left to the mercy of the mob. So from this, actually, one of the villains, or what do you call a kind of, semi-villain in the novel, has been picked out from this. But where the story ends, I start the story by saying that he had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and girls died with him, and he lets the boy live, and then he is given a task to live to fight another day. And his whole life purpose is to live for the cause, irrespective of whether they're doing right or wrong. And as he goes along, you realize that he's doing wrong things. But his original inspiration is that, he feels that, by supporting that organization of LTTE and doing whatever they're asking him to do, without questioning anything. There's so many things that he does in the novel which does not, justify anyway that, his conduct, because in the normal prism of life, when you see that conduct is not acceptable. But he believes that, he's doing it for the cause. So that cause is dead in 2008. He's not even aware that he's being manipulated by somebody. So that's one thing where it is inspired from a true event. That's one. Now, let's say now we have talked about extensively about the 26/11 attacks on, Mumbai. So now one of the villains is kind of developed from that background, which is much talked about relatively in the recent history of India. And without taking names, who are the villains you're talking about. And, so there is a fair amount of information background available from which you have tried to create a character. And there's a certain amount of element of, sensitizing the readers to when things go wrong, from what all sides things can go wrong. And maybe as individuals, many of the innocents who were affected, many of the innocents who were killed, who had nothing to do with what was happening in the kind of, let's say, the wanton destruction of violence which took place. But even then, there are villains who are facilitating this. So here again, of course, I have not met any of them in person. If you're asking me that, and it's a personal interaction. Two. So, like I said, one of the villains is modeled out of that, and kind of using imagination to use variation so that it is not a cut and paste of A versus B. In my previous novel, when I used to work in hydroelectric projects in a remote place in Himachal Pradesh, so we used to have a large number of workers, maybe 700-800 workers, and many of them, if you see, when you work in that life in the hydroelectric project, and especially when you do work in the tunnels, it's very high risk. It's almost like military life, in the sense that the risk quotient is almost comparable to that level, very high. So there also you find people, who are willing to risk their life on a day-to-day basis. Day-to-day basis, just because he gets into $300 a day, he'll get $400 a day, or into $400, $600 a day. So then you see these people, what I used to call them, what you call extraordinary life of ordinary mortals. In that, that kind of, so the more you meet, there are so many people you meet, and let's say in this second novel I have talked about, the spectrum is very vast. It covers characters from, let's say the lead character is a lady, she's an IIM lady from one end. I do not have any character whom I can say that she represents, somebody else, name change. No. But I have met, the IIM ladies who are capable, who run businesses, and who are as sharp as any of the men in the business world. So to that extent, inspired from, in that sense. So there are many. So I've had, been fortunate that I've met a number of people, travel quite widely in connection with my work. So yes, and traveling to places, whether it's India widely, north, south, east, west, and as also out of India. Wow. And including, let's say, there is one perspective which I've given let's say, there's a slave trade which started from a country called Gambia. So from a place called Banjul in West Africa. That's where the slave trade started when the Britishers started, the first export of slaves started from there. When you go there and if you see that, there's a jail and a kind of memorial which are made, even after so many years, you will almost kind of, feel as if your blood is going to freeze. That kind of, that you can't believe that human beings, we could have been doing one to another what they've done, what was done in those days. Unbelievable. So in that case, then you always talk about, so what, for 200 years, there was slave trade and so many men killed and so much of nonsense was done. So how do you retribute? How do you pay them back? So the perspective given on that. So many things that when you see and experience, it comes, of course, it is not a biographical thing that you're writing events as they happen, nor is it a travelogue, but you use in the events and then use imagination, and that's what makes it fiction.
Yeah,
otherwise,
very
then, of course, it'll be a documentary, things like that.
That's very interesting. I have audience questions coming in, but before that, I just want to ask Sujit one question, similar to what I asked Shibu, right? Why don't you give us your favorite story in the book and, tell us where are the shades of gray and, what inspired you? And just take us through the various shades. I wouldn't say shades of gray, but just the various shades or elements which make the story unique. Can you pick your favorite story from your book?
It's I don't believe in coincidences, but I do not know what to call it. Shibu just talked about the Bombay attack on the Taj Hotel. And there was a famous character called Kasab, who was I think the only one who was alive, taken alive. And he was given the capital punishment. My last story is I have of course changed the character's name. It is Zayan. So through Zayan, I tell this. I have created this. This is one of those 6 stories which is not in real life, which I have got experience of her, but I've constructed that. It starts from a kid who, in the West, our country's West, I'm not going to name it, as a kid, is sold to soldiers or militants. And he is taken away, and he has a very close friend. So it starts with this friendship thing, and where they keep on going and running to this apple orchard to eat green apples. Then, of course, I mean, he is sold, he's taken, and as a kid, he is trained and he's shot in height. So there's an advantage, and he becomes a terrorist. And the movie sort of flows on, and it's a night before he's about to be hanged. That night, the story is only about that night, where in his cell, he is replaying his entire life, starting from his childhood friend, seeing him being shot by the Indian army, and then being sold, and then the thrill of the thrill of the rattle of the machine gun, the thrill of seeing blood being sprayed all over, it takes over his character. And in the end, he is thinks about that he wants to go back to his parents at one point of time, but he is allowed to see them from a distance, but not to go into the house. And he's taken back again. And in the morning, when they come to take him away, and when he's hung, the last line says, and he suddenly got the smell of fresh green apples. Now, Kasab was a part of the whole thing. He killed, he is a criminal, he was given the capital punishment, everything. My perspective was, he was not a born criminal. What were the circumstances that made him? Who trained him? Why? And why did he become who he did become in the end? And of course, paid with his life. So I think it's the same thing. Bombay, the story, it's sort of a common thing, but I think I would call it one of my, it gave me chills writing it.
Yeah, but and this is, I would say, the perfect example of this whole topic, because even a terrorist is not black, right? I mean, black or evil, right? So we were all born equal, and how we grow and the society or the place we are born in, our privilege, that's what makes us, right? And that's what makes us gray, not black or white. I think this completely symbolizes or exemplifies rather the topic we are talking about. So thank you for that, Sujit. And actually, I also got chills while hearing about the story. So that's awesome.
If I have two more minutes on this particular question that you asked. In the same book, there is a story called Yasmin Bibi, which deals with triple talaq. Now, I do not know how many people know this or not, but I did a lot of research that in Islam, you cannot say talaq, talaq, talaq. They are given at different times. You say talaq once, which is now things will have to be worked upon so that the second one does not come. And then second talaq comes, then there's an opportunity to rectify it. Once the third talaq has come in, and after that, if the husband repents, the reason the gap is there so that the husband can repent and take it back, not take it forward. And the talaq will not happen with only one talaq. But when you say talaq, talaq, talaq in a heat of moment, and then next day morning you wake up and you realize that I made a mistake, it's too late. Then what happens? The woman, if he wants to get that woman back as his wife, the woman has to marry another person, consummate the marriage, get a divorce from that person, and then only can she come back. And Yasmini deals with this particular story, this aspect of triple talaq, and what goes through the mind of the woman. So she now has to consummate with somebody who she doesn't even know.
So you will not tell us the climax. We have to read your
No,
book
I will
for the
not.
climax.
I will not.
All right. Okay. But very interesting story again. Let me move on to the questions because there are quite a few coming. Shibu sir, this is for you. So Shwetakesh, sorry, it's a very small letter, so I have to read it out. He says, I'm a great fan of your work. I read Faith and the Beloved. What inspired you for the character of Naiti?
I think I've already answered this question in parts before. In the sense, the Naiti, that the characters, it's a name given, but otherwise the character is basically an IIT lady who's breaks the traditional mold of the Indian families where business are done only by men, and she comes out, starts a business of her own, and she's a woman in her own right. She's not a direct lift off from any. That's why I said in the beginning, she's inspired by many of the women whom I have met, the people who work in the IIT, IIM, women who work in the business world, who are capable and who have proved themselves to be as many. And there are running examples which are standing out. You read in the media only about top 3, 4, or 5 of them, but there are so many of them which may not be right on top, but part of many organizations who are handling this. So this character was a deliberate design to kind of reflect to the people that ever since your liberalization of the economy, we do have women who have got educated from traditional conservative families, but once they get the business knowledge and the business skill, they are as good. So here also we talk about the family she's the best brain, and they're going through a business slump, and they can't figure out what to do, and still they're reluctant to take her advice. Because why? Because she's a girl. But of course she breaks a mold and pulls them through, and she's the one who kind of saves that family business in part. So some of it has been, it's inspired to the extent of meeting people from who are ex-IIT, IIM caliber. But there is no direct match. But I thought that kind of story should be told. I mean, the idea was actually, in many ways, I will say, it's like what people say is, in Mahabharata, when you talk about Indian women, if you take Draupadi as a depiction of Indian woman, she's sold by her own husband or husbands in that the gambling game which goes on. She's put as a what do you call it? One of the properties for sale. I mean, terrible thing. And then she sold out, and then her own what do you call brother-in-law, cousin, or whatever you call it, Dushasan. They want to disrobe her and insult her in the public. It's only a friendship with Lord Krishna which saves her. No, she didn't go into wind up in a wine bag and go and get into mourning for the rest of her life. She pulled down her hair and said, "I will not tie it back till I kill that guy and drink his blood." So that's a kind of fierce woman that we have had.
Yeah.
So in many ways, people, when you face with challenges, do not give up and take it in equal measure and give it back. So in this character has in some ways shades of that also, where you're saying that the Indian woman is traditionally not one who will just anything happens who are there to be someone has to hold her hand, otherwise he'll sit and sob. There are many who do that, but there are many who stand up. And if you see both, even if you see whether it's Ramayana or Mahabharata, Sita also, she has kept her dignity in Lanka. When she comes back, she is again put to the fire test. She says, okay, up to terms, she decides to go her way. So that's, it's a character and strength. If you see that, our traditional women who have been shown are very, very strong people, not like that, Hindi movie sob stories, they're, from the morning, to the beginning of the movie till the end of the movie, that when the mother is crying or the woman is crying. That part is there. But equally, you're showing characters who are strong. So in this second novel, of course, the lead protagonists are women and they are strong characters. So in many ways, in addition to reflecting this, they're also reflective of the traditional fighting spirit of the Draupadi, if we may call it that, wherein if somebody has done injustice, you get back. So, it's like, what do you call it's retribution is fair. If somebody is being unfair, you can be equally unfair, nothing wrong. Exactly. There is no problem in issue in handling that. So that's how that motivation that characters come from many sides. But the basic purpose was, one of the ideas was to tell that, there's nothing wrong in women being economically independent and standing for themselves. It's only a matter of, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to have a tag of a husband or a father or a daughter or a son for you to stand. You can stand. Who's stopping you from standing, right?
Yeah, so I know. And I would like to add here that growing up, you often want female role models, either in real life or in books, right? So I used to always find most of the role models in like authors used to write about male protagonists, male heroes. So writing about characters like Naiti, who can actually, inspire, women, and also tell men that this is what a woman is like, is actually quite a good thing to do and really helpful for people reading it. So that's cool. Also, I have a question. What inspired the writing of your book, Faith and Beloved? It's from Asif Hussain.
Yeah, so inspired the writing in the sense, writing has been something which has stayed with me since a long, long time, since my school days. So it is just that as a man in uniform, you do not take the liberty of writing fiction because you have so many things to write about. You're busy writing about strategy, tactics, warfare, torpedo, missiles, and name it what. So it's only after I came out and, when I, hung up my uniform and came out and having worked in a hydroelectric project that I was able to write the first book. And the first book took me 4 years in research and writing and about 3,600 man writing hours to complete. The second book took me 2 years in research and writing, about almost 1,800 man writing hours. So the phenomenal amount of research goes into writing. So that inspiration part is always there. The first book was mostly modeled after literary fiction, what we call that Booker Prize style of writing. The second book was, I wanted to write a thriller for very many reasons. One, that the Indian environment with so many people playing, that which was ever since that, the Russians vacated Afghanistan in 89 and all those terrorists decided to come on to Kashmir. There's so much of, the background activities, intelligence and polluting of the society, which was done by, let's say the nefarious forces, the enough stories to be told. So that is one of the reasons I decided to pick up. And I picked up I wanted to tell LTT as a story to the new generation because they were the fiercest terror organization that have ever existed in the history of the world. They were the ones who brought in the concept of suicide terrorism. They could motivate a small girl to go and blow up our ex-prime minister. And they motivated hundreds of them to go and give up their lives in the name of the cause and said, that it is far more honorable to die than to live under subjugation. So I'm not here to justify and nor am I making a political comment. I'm not saying anything on what they did is right or wrong. But their ability to motivate people, it's, what do you call that? It's terrifying that if you can have somebody who can motivate people to do this, the biggest challenge is, the legal system that we have is based on a premise that a man or a woman values his or her life. So what do you tell him? That if you do something wrong, I'll put you in jail. If you do a murder, I will take your life. Now, if your start point is that I'm giving my life, what else can you do to it? Then you're playing outside the society, you're playing outside the legal frame of your society, you're outside of everything in your, that in your imaginable parlance, you need to think beyond. So you should not one. So that is a deliberate effort. One, I wanted to bring in LTT and how it had linked up. And what Sujit also mentioned about, how the terror network and, there's a thing called the philosophy of culpability of ignorance. So what it means is that if a man is ignorant or a woman is ignorant and he or she is doing something without being aware that what she's doing is wrong, then can she be punished for her ignorance? The normal approach of a law is that in ignorance of the law is not an excuse. You're supposed to be aware of the law. That's what education is for. You're supposed to be dutiful citizens, etc. But let's say if you're, if you like, the beginning you were discussing, see, behavior of an individual is a reflection of his value system. And the value system in any society, and as much in our society, is in his formative years, is his family, education, religion, and society. And formative years means I stop at 12. Beyond 12, majority of the people are discerning enough to see for him or her. So these four will have influence on him and deciding on what is right and what is wrong. So if an individual is put in a society that, going and killing up maybe 100 people, shooting them in Bombay is the right thing to do, and he's truly convinced that's the right thing to do, then the question is, are you going to punish him for his ignorance? So this is an area where, so many of this changes when, the value system and belief that, the difference between, it's like this, if the famous saying that, which I've quoted in this book in Mahabharata, where Acharya Drone takes the thumb of Ekalavya. One of the explanations given is that, that it is not only enough for a Kshatriya to be trained in the art of weaponry, his mind should be tempered to handle the power that goes with it. So that, Ekalavya he only learned the art, but he did not have any tempering of the mind. So therefore, he will be a dangerous person. So his thumb was taken. In practice, if you correlate that, the difference between the military and the terrorists only these two. That as an organization, military they're handling weapon, but there are people who handle that power is tempered with responsibility to handle responsibly. In the case of terrorists, like what Sidhu is mentioning, he gets happy seeing, spraying out guns, you see blood flow, he's happy, and that there is no tempering or there's no control. So writing of this novel that, what do you call a crime thriller mystery fiction, what I would call, I only add a historical to it because it is set in the background of history, recent history, was something which was planned out, which I wanted to do. One of the things was also to give a perspective on events which has happened without any bias of the media or prism of an individual or prism, to give facts as they are to the reader so that for the benefit, be it 2611, be it demonetization, be it LTT, be it the terrorist activities, be it whatever events which are discussed in the book, to some value addition to the reader who reads. That is our motivation.
All right. Let me just move to Sujit. I have a question from Apurva Khadye. And this is also what Shibu was talking about. And there is a lot of, and I'm gladly saying that because I'm a woman myself, but there is a lot of focus on, you could say our future, how our current and future, and how have we changed over the generations, and how do we go ahead. So his question is, how do you think treatment of women or the portrayal of women has changed over the years in books and stories? And how do you do it? I mean, how do you handle it in your own book also, in your thought process when you write down the stories? So how has the evolution been in your mind, Sujit?
That's a lovely question. Thank you so much for asking that. This book is an example of what a woman's role is. Out of the 26 short stories, I think nearly 15 of them are women-oriented. One of the most challenging time I had writing this book was to get into a woman's mind, being a man, and feeling the emotions like a woman would. In one of the stories about a woman not being able to conceive her own biological child, and how that experience pushes her over the edge. It was one of the most difficult stories I could write. I wrote because I had to keep going back and forth. I mean, I would have to go into her psyche. This was true story, so it helped me a lot. I had to get into her head, think like her, write like her, write like the way she would have written, then come back after writing some portion, be myself, the man, then again go back into her psyche, and to actually feel and express the pain of when she is taking a shower and she realizes she's a body, and what goes through her mind at that point of time, how she pushes away everybody away from her as a result. That, I think, is a perfect answer to his question, to Apurva, I think, Apurva's question, that things are changing. Things are changing. Like a lot of male writers are also writing about very strong, powerful roles or stories about a woman or about women. Things are changing. I think the imaginative world itself, that's where it revolves. I mean, it's in your head. So yeah, nowadays men are also slipping into the role of a woman.
Women, yeah, because like they say, women's rights are human rights, right? They're not just women's rights. I mean, what women should do and mold themselves as is a concern to everybody because they form half of the population. we have only like around 7-8 minutes of the session. So I have two questions for you, Sujit, after which I'll ask the last question to Shibu.
Okay.
One is, and of course, I'll leave it to you to, give your ending comments. Why the name Rukhsat? What does it mean and why the name Rukhsat?
Okay, actually the full name of the book is Rukhsat, The Departure. Now, the premise was all the stories I have written happened in the past at some point of time. Now, are they dead after the episode are over? If something has happened, an accident has happened, or a person has lost a loved one 20 years back, is that incident dead? No, it is not. It's a story. It is etched in time. If, for example, if it ever became possible to teleport yourself back, and you can teleport yourself back to that particular point when it's happening, it will be playing again. So each of these stories are independent. The premises, in this book, 26 stories, characters come together to narrate their stories. And after that, they have to say bye. They have to say, give me permission to leave because I cannot stay here. I have come, I have told my story, and I must go back now. And that's how Rukhsat, which is asking for permission to leave, and the departure is the final act of departure.
Wow, the name itself is so imaginative. Awesome. Okay, and the last question for you is that what's your next book about and when is it coming out? Do you have any information or is it still in embryonic stage?
No, it is 10 chapters have been written, and the last chapter I wrote about a year back. And I'm stuck, but yeah, the book. So this is something I do not know. I hope my family members do not get very upset about this, what I'm going to say. Is my great-great-grandfather's name was Durgadas Bandapadhyay. He was in the British Army, and he wrote a book called Vidrohi Bangali, which is 1857 Mutiny. It's based on 1857 Mutiny. And he had a concubine, and her name was Padnabai. And his book actually writes more about, very little about his affair with Padnabai, but more about the rebellion itself, the rebellion itself, or revolt, as one might say. I have picked up Padnabai's character, and this is a imaginative. The characters are real. My great-great-grandfather is real, Padnabai is real, but their love story forms the backdrop of my book, and where their love story is given preference, and the historical details of the revolt is in the background. So that's my next book. I hope to, and the book will be called The Curse of a Courtesan.
Courtesan, wow, this is like movie material. Very good. So all the best to you. I hope
Thank you so much.
you can publish very quickly and it becomes like a bestseller, another bestseller, and gets translated into all the languages in the world. So all the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Shibu, last two questions for you. This question is from a reader. What's the current book on your bedside table? And the second question is, what are you writing next? And when is it going to come out?
Now, please repeat that first question.
What's a book on your bedside table? As in, what are you reading right now? Who is your favorite author and what are you reading right now?
Okay, just for your information, I've stopped reading fiction since I started writing in 2009. So I have not read any fiction since 2009.
But anything like non-fiction?
No, I have non-fiction, of course, I keep reading. That is a whole lot of stuff. But
Okay,
mostly technology related and, depending on what research you're doing, but no light reading. So that
that's
to
how you're
that
doing your
extent,
research. Okay, got it. So talk about your next book.
next book, there are a number of stories turning in my mind. I have not fixed on which one, but I will start writing next year. See, India is a billion population and each one has a story to tell. Stories are there, enough of them to be told. It's just a question of putting pen to paper and writing.
Yeah, that's true.
Stories is never a challenge. But as I said, the character sketching is an ongoing process because finally, it's all about people. That, when you write a novel, your character should come live. And that is always a challenge in fiction writing because the characters have to be fictional. It is not, I cannot copy paste Indira Gandhi or Mahatma Gandhi and say it is fictional. They will be actual characters. So you have to pick out, people which are convincing, but at the same time, you have to add that fiction element wherein, you're bringing in the traits, what it's needed to be there. And that's a major part, because when I wrote my second book, I had about 200 characters in my anvil, out of which I used about 8. And for the next book, I do not know if any of those 190 will be of use to me. So again, I'm in the process of building up. You observe, each, many on televisions, on newspapers, or whatever you read, you observe. Some people whom you meet, sometimes you're just observing in a railway station or a bus stand or a restaurant or a airport, wherever. So you keep collecting, and then, you sit down. When you start writing, okay, it's like preparing for a feast. I have not decided on the menu, but I've got my ingredients. I have a vast choice. I can choose to make whatever I want. So it's something like that. So that process is on.
Talk a little bit about the ingredients. No, what is right now on your table? Is it like a character? I mean, just talk about some character or some theme which is running in your head.
No. There are 3-4 themes. I mean, at any given time, there are 3-4 novels running in my mind. So the storytelling is never an issue for me. So till now it has not been. So that my question is, out of which one to prioritize and pull it out. So anyway, I will start writing from the beginning of next year. So
all right. So all your fans are waiting to hear, again, another bestseller from you, your third bestseller. And will it be crime fiction? Will it be based on terrorism, or will it be like a travel adventure? What will it be? Will it be crime thriller or mystery?
I'm not sure. When I started writing the first book, I wanted it to be a literary fiction kind with a variation, which I've done. Second, I wanted it to be a crime thriller, which I've done. Third, I've not made up my mind. All that I can tell you, there will be a prism of history in it. That is a mandatory thing. That will be there.
Awesome. Okay.
But rest, I am also not sure as to which one I've got 3-4 of them churning in my mind. So let me see which one I pick up.
Okay, we are all waiting with bated breath. I think we'll have to end the session. It's 4:45. Thank you, Sujit. Thank you, Shibu, for an awesome.
Thank you very much for having us with you.
Yeah, very, very entertaining. I didn't expect it to be like so enlightening, entertaining. We had a very good chat. Thank you so much for indulging me and answering my questions.
Thank you, Smita.
I'm
Thank you so
waiting
much.
to read your books next year. Thank you, Shibu.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.